Hello everyone and welcome to CodeTips. Sorry, I have been away for a long time, but now I'm back to continue making the videos. So today I'm starting the CSS tutorial series. In this series, it's going to be a playlist. So there will be many videos and we will learn everything about CSS and what CSS can do and what we can use CSS for. So we will learn from 0 to 100% of the series. So if you have not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe so you will get the notification of my upcoming videos. So what is CSS? CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. Why it is called cascading? Because it is like a waterfall that falls from one step to the one below and continues flowing downwards. Same thing with CSS. So if you write a line of code that has a property and a value, for example, if you want to change the color of the heading to red, but if you write another line of code right below that code that the heading should have a color of green, then the second line of the code will be accepted by the browser and ignored first line. Okay, so let's take a look what I mean. To begin with, I'm going to start by a folder. So I will right click here, make new folder. Okay, and I'm going to name it Introduction to CSS. Now this folder is completely empty, so we have to go into code editor. I'm going to use bracket for code editor. You can use whichever you like. So to open the folder we made on desktop, I will click here. It says getting started, open folder. Then we go on desktop and introduction to CSS, open the folder. Now there are no files, so I'm going to add two files. New file 1 first. It's gonna be index.html because without HTML we cannot use CSS. Then we will make another file called main.css. Okay, so what we want to see here, if we have element written in HTML, then how to change the color. So let's work on HTML first. So I'm going to write exclamation mark, hit tab, and it gives me the whole coding that we need in the beginning of HTML file. And I'm using a plugin called Emmet, and that allows me to write codes very fast. Anyways, we will speak about that plugin later on in tutorial series, but for now we are working on introduction, so let's focus on that. So in here I'm just going to change quickly Introduction to CSS. Now I'm going to add the CSS file already, but later I'll explain you in detail what do I mean. Okay, so in body I'm going to write h1. Okay, and then I will write main heading. Okay, now I'm going to save the file. So file, save all, so it will save index.html and main.css. Now let's take a look how it looks. So we will click right click on index.html, show in Finder, and then we say open in Brave browser. Okay, and here you see that we have title says Introduction to CSS and it says main heading. That's what we had written on our code editor. So let's take a look how we can change the color. So here is the main heading. We want to change the color of this. So we go in main, we will write h1, then color red. Okay, we will save it with Command S on Mac or Control S on Windows. We go back to our browser, we refresh here, and you say the color changed to red color. So let's see what I wanted to show here about cascading. I'm back in the browser. So let's say I want to change the color, which means I mean to say override. So take a look at this one. Imagine this as the first step. So here I want to overwrite the line of code I written before, that H1, which means heading 1 should have red color. I want to say now H1 should have color green. Save this file and we go back to our browser. We refresh. See, the color changed to green. So when I come back to my code editor, you see that we did not touch it. We did not remove this code. We did not do anything. The moment you write a different value to a property that has already been declared once before, the second line will overwrite. So when we work with CSS, we want to make sure that we write from top to bottom and not to overwrite something and that we already have written before. Otherwise that can change the whole theme. So you want to be aware of this. We will speak about this in detail in later tutorials. So let's see what we learn next. Use of CSS. So CSS is used to present HTML elements with the styling, responsive layout, animation, coloring, changing the text sizes, font style, and adding images, giving them nice round corners, or a zoom in, zoom out on hover. There are tons of things we can do with CSS. So when you write any text in HTML file, it will appear without any style on the website, and that will look horrendous. But we do need HTML to display the content. But CSS is used to style that content, and that's what makes a website look elegant, attractive, and it keeps the customer coming to your website. So the better the website looks, the more customer you attract toward the website. Importance of CSS. CSS makes developers' life easier, which means like sow once, reap always. What does it mean? If you written a line of code once, the same line of code will be reused over and over again throughout the website. So let's take a look what I mean by that. I'm back in my code editor. So I'm going to remove the first line of code. I'm only going to keep the second one where it says green, okay? So let's go in index.html and I'm going to copy this text and we're gonna paste it a few times. So Control C or Command C for copy and Control V or Command V for paste. So I'm going to paste it many times. Now you will see what happens when we go in the browser. So let's save it first. File, save all. We are back in browser. Now as soon as I refresh, you will see all the text we had copied and pasted will appear here, and all of them will be green. Why all of them are green? Because we had already declared the property of a color to be green on H1. So it doesn't matter how many times you will write H1 or heading 1 throughout the website on whichever page, it will always appear with same styling. So that means you take an element, you give it a certain property with values, and then forget it, because this is what is going to be repeated all over your website. So what's the benefit of it? Is that you will not have to style the same thing over and over again. Now let's learn CSS syntax. Here is the example of what CSS syntax look like. So we have three words here. One is selector, then property, and value. So in here, for example, I have chosen paragraph, which is only P stands for paragraph within the less than and greater sign. Then we have a property. That means you want to apply this property to this element, and then a value. So what we're saying here, take this element, apply this value to this property. Okay, so let's take a look what I mean by that. Even though we have already done with the heading 1, we took the heading 1, we gave it a color and blue, but now let's try with paragraph. So I'm back in my code editor. I'm going to write here P for paragraph. Okay, and I will write here lorem, and I will hit tab, and it will give me some text. So now we're going to change this paragraph. Okay, so I'm going to control save. So we have HTML saved. Then we go in main.css, and I will write here P for paragraph, and I would say font size, I would say 2em, that means 2em unit. We're going to change the default size of 16 pixels into 32 pixels. So 1 em unit is 16 pixels. So I have written here 2 em units, which means 32 pixels. Okay, so I'm going to save this, and we will go back in the browser. As soon as I refresh, you will see the text below the headlines. There you go. So this is the size of 2 em units. Okay, if I want to change the color of this, I would say color red. Save the file, refresh, and the color is changed. So what's happening here, I have taken only one element, okay, which we call selector, and gave it two properties with two values. Okay, so font size should be this, color should be this. There can be a lot more, like font weight, font style, font shadow. There are so many properties that we can use on one element. And here, let me tell you, there are many elements in HTML. So if you have not seen my HTML videos, please go back and check the HTML series in a playlist of HTML. I'm going to add a link in the end of the video for the playlist, so you can go and watch that. But let me give you here some examples. So we go in index.html. So here we will have, I'm giving only few one. So there is a H1, which means heading 1. So we have heading 2. We have heading 3. Okay. We have heading 4. So it goes up to 6. Then we have paragraph, we already saw here. Okay. Then we have a strong, that to make the word bold. Then we have table. Okay, there are so many, so you should check out my HTML videos to know all the elements we have in HTML. Now let's take a look what we learn next in CSS. So I hope the syntax is clear. Now connecting CSS to HTML. There are 3 ways to apply CSS styling to a website. Okay, so let's take a look on all 3 ways. So ways to insert CSS in HTML are external CSS, which means separate file with .css extension, which you saw earlier. We created a main.css file which we linked to our index.html. Let's take a look again. So here you see link says relationship is a style sheet, and the href is main.css. So in case if I remove this, okay, I'm going to cut this line of code, and I'm going to save it. And if I will go back in our browser, all the styling we did in HTML will be gone. So I'm back in my browser. If I refresh, you see the coloring and the font size is gone, because now the HTML is not connected with the CSS. Okay, so let's take a look what are the other ways to add CSS in our HTML file. So this was external CSS, separate file with CSS extension. Next one is internal CSS. A style is written inside the head in between the style tag, and this is where we write the code. So in this way, we do not need CSS files. So let's take a look what I mean. So I'm in my code editor, and this is our index.html. Now inside the head section, I'm going to write the style. Okay. Now anything I write inside here will be applied on HTML. So we will give this time different colors. So we would say H1. We want to give it color blue this time. Okay, so all those heading will turn to blue. Then I will go out of the curly bracket and I will select paragraph. Okay, and then I would say font size 1.5 em unit, so it would not be that big, and I want color to be red. So let's save this file. Now I'm working on HTML, but it's still working on a style which is written inside the head section. So I will save it, go back to browser, and let's take a look. So I'm in my browser, let's refresh. There you go. So heading changed to blue, paragraph color changed to red, and the size is increased. So even when we are writing in HTML, we did not write anything in CSS. So let's say if I delete all of this and I save it, save all, okay, go back to our browser, refresh, and nothing happens. See why? Because this styling is written inside the HTML file. I'm back in my browser, index file. So this is the second way of adding a style to our HTML, but I'm going to remove this one because we're going to look at the third way. Save this. Let's take a look just to make sure the styling is cleared. Refresh. The styling is gone. Let's take a look what is the next way of adding CSS into HTML. Inline CSS. Styling is written inside each element, like for example, paragraph style equal, then you put these double quotes, and inside these double quotes you put the property and the value. So let's take a look. So let's go back in browser first of all and see that there's no styling. So refresh, there's no styling. Let's style it. So I'm back in my browser. Let's say I'm going to target the first heading. I would write a style, okay, then I write equal double quotes, and then I would say inside here color red. Okay, let's save it. So with Control or Command S, or go in File and Save or Save All. Let's take a look in the browser. Refresh. So you see what happened, that we gave a styling to first heading and the color was only applied on the first heading, but it ignored all of it. Okay, so this style which we have seen, it is not a practical one. That means you will have to style everything separately. Okay, nor the second one where we had written a styling inside the head section, because then your HTML and style file is together. But with the time, when your website will grow bigger, there will be a lot of code of CSS, and your whole HTML file will be a mess, which will be really hard to deal with. So what is the solution is the third one, which is to create the .css extension file with any name. As long as it is saved with .css, it will work. And the CSS file must remain inside the same folder. Okay, so for example, the introduction to CSS is my website. Then we have index.html. So CSS file can be inside this folder, or it can also be inside another folder. So if I click here, say new folder, we say CSS, and I drag this main.css and put inside this folder, it also works. But now what we will need to do when we go in index, when we connect, the CSS file, we have to say go in the folder of CSS and then find out the CSS file. So let's take a look how we do it. So I'm in my HTML file. I'm going to remove these few headings. Okay. Okay. Now let's take a look. So inside head, we have to add our CSS file, which is laying inside a folder called CSS. So we would say link, hit tab, okay, or type it out, link rel, which is relationship, equal double quotes style sheet, then href, and you would write CSS. That's the folder. See, it is already showing me there's a folder with this name. If I write slash, it will give me the name of the file. See, main.css. So I can just click here or type it out. Okay. Now if I save it, okay, our file is not showing here anymore. You know why? Because now it is showing us this folder. Let me zoom it. So in here, we have seen now that there's a CSS. If I click on this arrow, main.css. So let's click on this one, and it has no code at all. So let's put some coding here. So I will write h1, and this time we will give the color yellow, okay. Then we will give it font weight, okay, 800, so it will be nice and thick. Now let's target our paragraph. So this is selector, as we learned already. We would say font size 1.3 EM units, okay, and we want color to be, let's say, gray, okay. Let's save this file. Let's go in the browser and take a look. If I refresh, see, the color of the text went gray and this went bold because we give 800, and that's why it's looking bold, okay. So the right way, so I wrote the first one is inline CSS. We don't want to do this. It's a lot of work. You have to write code for every single element separately. Then internal CSS, which means you write styling inside the head section, which is gonna be a mess once your website is big and has a lot of pages and requires a lot of code. So now what we have left is external CSS. So just make a file with CSS extension and then write everything inside that file, and browser will notice the CSS file and apply it on HTML. So this is it for the introduction of CSS, guys. I'm going to be posting my next video very soon where we will learn a bit more about CSS. If you have any questions about this video, please feel free to comment below and I will get back to you as soon as possible. So make sure to subscribe my channel and click on the bell icon so you can get the notifications of my next video. Till then, have a good day, keep practicing, and see you soon.